But what we need to do in the political space is to open up the debate and to not be cowed by this demand for conformity and orthodoxy. And our next space for that in real time is between now and the next budget. Because the debate again, and listen out for it, you've heard it, or you'll hear it again, it'll be fairness, fairness, fairness. If you were to do a word check on the pronouncements of senior people within the administration, they will be talking fair, but they will be delivering disaster. So I want a fair society. I think we have big strategic questions, some of which Terry has pointed to, that we need to consider. But for those of us that are active in representative politics and elected, whether to the Dáil or the councils or anywhere else, our immediate focus has to be in this period on this next budget. Because let me finish by saying this. There's no more to cut. I remember a time in my own constituency work where you could sort of predict not just the issues that would come to you, but the people that would come to you and their concerns about their terrible living conditions, their housing needs, and so on. I'm sure many of you are familiar with that. To the greatest extent, that's now been turned on its head, because the numbers of those struggling and struggling badly have just grown exponentially. And anybody in touch with community work or political work at a grassroots level knows in very great detail the effect that these cutbacks have had. So little comfort to anybody when we hear, well, we still have a budget deficit of 14 billion or 18 billion or whatever way it's calculated. That's true, the deficit needs to be reduced, but not at the cost of working people. And it needs to be done in a way that is genuinely fair and healthy and pro-growth and pro-employment and pro the provision of quality public services. Deficit reduction has so far been used as an excuse to decimate all of those things. And I think we draw a line in the sand now and say no more of that. Reminder.
Actually embarrassed myself by trying to introduce the next speaker, who is probably better known to all of you. It's Eugene McCartan, who's General Secretary of the Communist Party of Ireland since 2002, a well-known contributor and commentator on the economy, and sort of the guardian of the most decent place in Temple Conley bookstore.
I'm not bringing to you any ideas about saving the system. I'm not interested in saving capitalism. I'm interested in replacing capitalism. So, first of all, I'd like to thank the organisers for the invitation to speak this morning at at this Desmond Greaves weekend show, an event that has become an important arena for discussion and debate, raising issues and presenting challenges to all those who believe in and are committed to the struggle for national unity, sovereignty and democracy. This debate is timely, coming at a time when many of our fellow citizens are struggling to make ends meet, a period in which inequality is growing, unemployment is growing, mass immigration is laying waste to our towns and villages around the country. The whole fabric of our society is being pulled apart, with a crude and growing commodification of all areas of human life. So for us to be debating an economy for the common good is absolutely central, as we know that our people will experience even greater hardship in the coming years. Our planet can no longer sustain monopoly capitalism. We now stand on the precipice of what might well may be an irreversible process of significant climate change that is already affecting us as a people and will have devastating consequences for hundreds of millions, if not billions, of our citizens across the world. This is a great crisis of the system. It is a crisis of the system, and it's true nature of the system that governs our lives. The crisis has also shattered the illusions carefully crafted by the mass media and other apologists for the system, that capitalism had overcome and had passed beyond its structural weaknesses in a cyclical crisis of slump and boom. We are also witnessing how really shallow this democracy is. Although flaunted and touted around the globe by the imperialist elite, backed up by massive military firepower and imposed as the best and indeed the only possible form of democracy there is. Yet, we have witnessed two governments removed within the European Union, the Italian government and the previous Greek government, being replaced by technocratic governments. Two more governments recently removed in Latin America and the surrounding of Venezuela with numerous military bases. The living standards of the majority are being reduced and public services cut to shreds in order to sustain and enrich the financial oligarchy and to bolster the profits and profit margins of the corporations. James Connolly put it so well in 1915, I quote, "Governments in capitalist society are but committees of the rich to manage the affairs of the capitalist class." That is as clear today as it was in 1915. If we reflect upon the 90 years of partition, we can see that we have two failed entities. This state has failed our people economically. The Irish ruling class has overseen mass immigration, generation after generation, people seeking work in other countries. Large sections of our people have experienced generational poverty, chronic bad housing, and constant high levels of unemployment interspersed with brief periods of economic spurts. The class that won out with the victory of the counter-revolution in 1922 were happy to maintain and sustain the economic structures and relations built up over centuries of colonial plunder, resulting in uneven economic development and uneven economic trading relations. This relationship of dependency was built into the partitionist settlement because it was in the interest of the people like William Martin Murphy and his class. It was in their class interests, just as it was with unionism in the North, whose industrial base was dependent on the links to the British Empire and its global network of exploitation. Neither this state nor the statelet in the North has served our people well. The development of public companies in the South did advance the economic development and stabilise the declining population and immigration. The state development aspects of the economy that Irish capitalism was unwilling to develop, but these were developed to bolster native capitalism. This economic strategy ran its course and was replaced with a policy of opening up the country to mobile transnational capital. We need to understand the forces at work in the present crisis. Otherwise, an economy for the common good is merely a utopian idea doomed to fail. The vision of a better society must be linked to a strategy that is based in an understanding of class forces and class interests. The economic system of capitalism is now in deep crisis, a crisis that can only deepen. It is global in proportion and is systemic and cyclical. Crises are an inherent part of the system itself. At its core, this is a crisis of overproduction. As it is driven by the profit motive, it must constantly expand to the point where it saturates existing markets and plunges into crisis and recession. It is a system based on the premises of permanent growth in order for it to survive. As the system is driven by the profit motive, if profits decline or stagnate, then the whole system itself stagnates. It is driven to constantly expand its markets, to commodify all aspects of human lives and needs. But how can you have permanent growth on a planet of finite resources? This present crisis was triggered by a combination of overproduction and growing financialisation. The speculation in financial products such as derivatives. The consumption of commodities has been increasingly achieved by the availability of easy credit, in other words, of debt. But it is also becoming apparent that there is little or no discernible period between recession and small growth spurts. It is like a football bouncing down the stairs. The bounce is shorter, but doomed upwards in a downward trajectory. In Ireland, the trigger was the extended banking system in the massive housing bubble, coupled with heavy speculation in the European and global property markets. by Irish and other speculators using Irish financial institutions. Under orders from the European Union to prevent the collapse of the German and French banking system, the Irish state took complete responsibility for the massive corporate debt built up within the Irish financial institutions. Cheap money loaned by German and French and other international finance houses to Irish banks for speculative investment. This debt is now placed on the backs of the people, a debt that now stands at about €47,000 per person for every single person in this state. It is not the people's debt, it is an odious debt, and we should not pay it. This is a transfer of wealth from the people to the monopolies. The EU has created structures of debt dependency between the peripheral countries and the centre. This year alone, we will pay €7 billion to service the debt. In the last 4 months of this year, 2012, this state alone will hand over €2 billion to unsecured bondholders, while the government wants to cut €3.5 billion from government spending. So where is the drive for savage cuts coming from? We pay €7 billion to service a debt, €2 billion to unsecured bondholders, and the government wants to cut €3.5 billion in services. Where does the drive for cuts come from? Within the European Union, the crisis is worsening as the policy happens open to the European elite narrow and the crisis of the euro deepens. Germany is beginning to slide, and it was to be the bailout master. The solutions presented by the external troika, eagerly supported and implemented by the internal troika of the three main establishment parties, is working. Austerity is working as planned. It was designed to shift the burden of the crisis onto the backs of the working people. It is designed to defend the system. It is for the transferring of wealth from working people to the monopolies. It was never designed or intended to solve the people's problems. The American speculator and multi-billionaire Warren Buffett remarked in 2006 that, and I quote, "There is class warfare, all right, but it's my class, the rich class, that is making war, and we're winning." The crisis has presented an opportunity for globalised offensive by monopoly capitalism. Throughout the capitalist world, tens of millions of people are unemployed or underemployed. More are pushed into precarious employment. We can see the same approach here in Ireland, with savage cuts in health, education and other public services. And the working class and the workers facing wage reductions coupled with increase in charges and taxes. Poverty and homelessness are growing. Workers are being forced to work harder and longer for less. The retirement age is going up. Social benefits and public services are being cut. Workers' terms and conditions are under constant attack. What has taken decades of hard struggle and sacrifice by working people is being undermined and taken away on a scale not experienced before. And yet we know that the rich here in Ireland, like their counterparts abroad, are still getting richer and the poor are getting poorer. One has to ask, what exactly is the point of economic development if it was not about to improve the lot of the people? A number of scenarios have been put forward that I think we should look at. The government, the EU and the IMF have identified debt repayment as the most important priority. To achieve this, they tell us we need to do a number of things. To hand over the bulk of the National Pension Reserve Fund, our sovereign wealth fund, pump it into failing banks, which in turn hand it over to German and EU banks. To cut government spending and reduce the role of the state in the economy. To further deregulate the economy. To privatise state-sponsored companies. That is, to hand over them to foreign capital, which in turn will further weaken the economic and political sovereignty of this state. To give priority to handing over the bulk of the capital raised through the